It has been a minute since I've uploaded anything really, and the main reason for this is because I'm kind of taking a little, I guess you could say, break, well, at least trying to take a break from screens and social media, all this kind of stuff, just because I think most of us have probably heard this way too many times, and I'm probably sick and tired of hearing online influencers talking about, how bad the effects of all this stuff is. No matter though, it is pretty bad to spend so much time on screens all the time, and I've kind of tried to improve upon that a little bit, so I've been away. So today I want to talk about a little bit about, of course, black metal, what else do I talk about? But I wanted to talk a little bit about I guess you could say, the reasons of why bands pretty much within mostly black metal, and I would say death metal too, always, well, maybe not always, but a lot of the time use themes of either demons or Satan or some kind of gruesome kind of depiction of the world. I would say that mostly when you see black metal or very heavy genres of music, especially within like the metal realm, let's say, a lot of bands tend to use graphic imagery, usually depicting Satan or some kind of anti-religious scenery or something like this. And yeah, I just wanted to give my own opinions on this and why I think this is the case. Again, I am no scholar on the topic of black metal in general, but it's something that I'm interested in, and one of the reasons why I was so enamored with like black metal and stuff like this is because of the depictions on the covers and the lyrical themes of the music and stuff like this. And obviously, as being a musician myself and using these types of imagery and let's say themes, I think it's appropriate for me to give my own opinion, and hopefully it's somewhat interesting to whoever wants to watch it. But let's start at the beginning from what I believe this all started from, let's say, and the use of like the Baphomet and all this kind of stuff. So if we go back in time, I do believe that Venom was probably one of the first bands that used a lot of this black metal, well, maybe not black metal, but dark imagery, gruesome imagery. And I know that they used the Baphomet head in I don't know what album it was, but it was probably the one most people know if you're thinking about like early black metal and the influences of it. I'm sure they had like a Baphomet head on one of their albums, and I think one of their albums was called like black metal, or at least one of their songs was called this. So I know that, at least in this sense, because it garnered so much attention at the time, a lot of people started to also use this kind of imagery. And I think the value of the shock was there back in the 80s, I believe this was. And yeah, people still continue to use it to this day. I mean, it is still quite shocking to see. I mean, to me it's not, because I see it all the time, but maybe to the uninitiated it's quite graphic. But let's move on from just the history and the shock value. Like, why why Satan, why demons, why all this kind of stuff. Personally, I would say that, especially when it came to the second wave black metal and like the early Norwegian stuff, I do believe that there was a different sense of just shock value. Of course, I think that was still an intention there, but I like to believe that when we think of the lyrical themes of black metal, usually it's anti-religion. Usually it can be stuff about politics even, or usually it's a discontentment of the world in itself. A lot of the lyrics tend to be, or somewhat mythical, I would say too. I do believe that a lot of this kind of black metal imagery comes from some sort of kinship or feeling of kinship between, like, I would just say Satan or dark sort of force of the world and the musicians who created. I think, at least in my personal opinion, there is a connection to Satan, and I kind of feel a bit more on his side, let's say. I mean, that sounds a little bit blasphemous, but let me explain. When we think about the world, and we think about religion, and we think about the state of how it is, I mean, even today, everything seems bleak, everything seems grim. It feels like it's very impossible to achieve what we want in life, especially today. I mean, I guess people always have this kind of feeling, right? But again, I'm only speaking from personal experience. But, growing up in, I guess, the 80s or whatever it was, and, religion was still a thing, like a big part of society, perhaps. I mean, today it's not so much. In terms of Christianity, at least, it's pretty much non-existent. At least in my view, I know it still exists. You go to like America and you go to like, I don't know, the Westboro Baptist Church or something like this, and it's still probably very heavily influenced. But at least in my view of how I'm seeing things, at least in the UK and a lot of Western European countries, it's not much of a thing. Like a lot of the generation who are like my age or a little bit younger, or people who are probably below 40 and 50 whatnot, a lot of them are not very religious, I would say. And I think it's just a discontentment that people have had with religion, and I think it's kind of the awakening that people came to realize, and when industrial revolution and all this kind of stuff, religion kind of died out in itself anyway. People have become disenamored with religion and the promises of living according to some sort of dogma where the great Lord Jesus Christ is going to descend from the sky and save your soul. I think a lot of people, of course, are not really believing this myth. A lot of people are believing more in science, I would say, and well, maybe not so much these days. Yeah, a lot of people don't like it, and I think more in particular in the sphere of black metal and being a metalhead, whatnot. We see through the lie, we see through the delusion that people have this belief that there is some ultimate being that's going to save life, and I think that we are just more, or at least having the more realistic viewpoint on the world that there is no great savior. The only savior is ourselves, and I think that that's where Lucifer and Satanism comes in. Because there are some people who see like Satan and all this kind of stuff as being this kind of entity whose purpose is basically just to corrupt the souls of men and basically drag them to darkness. I think that's the typical view of most people in the world. There are a lot of people who see Satan as being this pure evil being who's only here to destroy the world. But I believe that in the eyes of many people who are making black metal, or metalheads in general, or just, let's just say black metal musicians who use this imagery, I believe that there is a mixture. I believe that there are some people who kind of just have this utter hatred of the world, and they kind of just wish for it to be annihilated, and through the use of like demons, basically like killing people and whatnot. This is their way of kind of expressing this emotion. Just total annihilation, I would say, is one viewpoint to have Satan, and having this kind of chaotic wish for the world to just kind of become this sort of land of chaos, let's say. And then I would say there's people who I would say kind of maybe are more aligned with my viewpoint of seeing, like Satan, all this kind of stuff, demons, as being masters of their own universes, let's say. If we look a bit loosely into kind of like the biblical aspect of Satan, we can say that, he's a master himself. He didn't bow to Adam. He didn't really, listen to God and all this kind of stuff. He went his own way. He was cast out of the pearly gates and went down to wherever he went, Hades, hell, whatever it is, and he kind of became the master of his own reality, let's say. And I think that's a very empowering feeling for a lot of us, that we see a lot of negative errors, or at least in our opinion, perhaps, or at least in my opinion, I see a lot of things in society that I think are just whacked or just a little bit off. And of course, I don't think I'm going to change the world. And to be honest, I'm not really here to change the world. My ultimate goal would be just to change my own destiny into the way I like, or into some sort of aspect that I see fit for myself. I don't concern myself too much of being some sort of messiah to save everybody. I think that's some sort of delusions of grandeur. But yeah, for me at least, the character of Satan is a more empowering view, I would say, compared to like God or something like this, who just gives you dogma and says, listen to me, and everything will be fine, which usually doesn't work out this way. And I couldn't tell you when, but at least I kind of found this realization by just reading and listening to black metal, just reading dodgy stuff as well. And I would say that's another reason why a lot of black metal musicians are using this imagery. Also, again, for shock value too, and all this kind of stuff. A lot of people who see it are like, "What the fuck's happening here?" To metalheads, I would say it just looks pretty cool. Like the artwork and stuff like this, it just looks nice. To us, at least, it looks pretty cool. Pretty brutal. And it just, it fits our image that we're kind of going for. This kind of darkness and stuff like this. And I don't want to speak for everybody because everybody's their own person. I'm just an individual. And perhaps I'm just projecting my own feelings onto other people, but I do want to say that I used to do that. I can't speak. It does feel like when within the artwork of black metal, not just the music, but the artwork and music, and the philosophy in the music, the lyrics, everything combined. It's a lot of, I don't know if the right word is misanthropy, but let's just say it's a lot of darkness, and that's a very general term. What do I mean by that? But it's usually not positive music, I would say, in terms of that the lyrics tend to speak about negative occurrences in life. And there are definitely songs I believe that are talking about like self-empowerment. There's a lot of black metal songs that have the ideology of the black flame and the apotheosis and the enlightenment within. There's a lot of music. I mean, if you listen to Dissection and you listen to some of these lyrics, I'm sure you'll be able to find some interesting lyrics there. But there is a aspect of Satan of this kind of self-empowerment, going your own way and being your own person. And I think that definitely does kind of, how to say, inspire people. I mean, it definitely inspired me. I mean, if black metal didn't exist, then I wouldn't really be doing any kind of art, I believe, from the outside looking in. Yeah, these kind of themes, like, to my family, they would think, like, what's going on here? It doesn't look positive. But of course, I'm finding my own positive meaning within this kind of artwork. Not every artwork suits everybody else. Everybody has their own particular leanings towards certain things, and it just happens to be that for me, this kind of art speaks to me that others don't as much, I suppose. Not that I only listen to black metal and I don't like any other form of artwork. I can appreciate a lot of different things that I find beautiful. Even things that are not necessarily dark and spooky like black metal. There's a lot of things that I do enjoy. Personally, I would say that black metal and the artwork in between and these philosophies within the music. And if you really don't think there's philosophical concept within black metal, again, the black metal is a whole genre of thousands of bands, different messages in the music. I'm sure there are some bands who just play for fun. They just use the imagery just for fun and shock value, and the lyrics don't really have any sort of deep meaning. There's probably tons of bands like this. But then there are bands who actually have some sort of satanic ideology in mind, of this kind of black flame, or perhaps even the more chaotic view of life. And even for me, it's true that I don't read lyrics of black metal that much, but when I do hear good lyrics, it tends to stick with me, because a lot of it does tend to be quite philosophical in a sense, and that's why it speaks to me. Like, to be fair, there's not that many other genres of music that I find have this same sense of philosophical concepts that black metal does. I guess I could talk a little bit about why I'm using this imagery. I mean, again, number one is black metal, so of course, if I'm trying to push my own promotion or whatever you might call it, if I'm trying to sort of, show people my own artwork, of course, I want people who are already involved in black metal or have a leaning towards it. For me personally, having something that kind of shows this is very important. Like when people are on YouTube or wherever looking for bands to listen to or looking for music to listen to, the artwork is the first thing they see before hearing the music, I would say. And I think that if you have artwork that looks somewhat interesting. Of course, I think more people will be willing to give it a listen, so that's probably number one for having some sort of good artwork. Of course, you want it to fit the theme. I'm trying to make black metal here, so I'm going to post rainbows and cats and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted something a little bit edgy, but also the meaning of the artworks I picked. I mean, the artists who made them for me, I just kind of bought them. It was not like I gave a specific design. I just kind of asked, do you have anything that's a little bit dark and spooky? And he sent me some designs, and I picked from that. And of course, if I'm thinking about my own ideology when it comes to black metal and satanism and all this kind of stuff, if you look at the artwork, at least when I was looking at it, for me there's a meaning that I find that is good enough to use, and perhaps that doesn't make very much sense, so I'll try to elaborate a little bit further. Like I say, the idea of Satan and this sort of demonic presence, I've never had. Well, I say I never had. I've watched a lot of horror movies, so there have been times when I'm a little bit spooked. But in general, I will say that in Satanism, they talk about the concept of demons or the daemons, or however you'd like to say, your pronunciation. And this concept basically is, how if to explain it in a more easier way, is having some sort of mask, basically, and that's the only way I can really describe it. To cultivate a mask of godhood is basically what this demon is. If you are able to channel everything that you want, channel your thoughts, your feelings, your desires into one single point within your mental framework, this becomes your demon, and it kind of becomes you also, but at the same time it's not. It kind of becomes a different personality, you could say. Or, well, for some people it can be like a dual personality, For certain situations, perhaps somebody would wear this sort of deific mask for a specific situation. That could be anything, to be fair. It could be trying to win a fucking bodybuilding competition. It could be making videos online. A lot of people are wearing masks these days, and perhaps we don't notice, but a lot of people, especially on the internet, since it's a bit easier to hide, they wear masks, some sort of alternate personality where they can hide behind their facades. And some people have this mask on a very temporary basis, Just in general, a lot of people in all facets of life wear masks. Perhaps we might not see it ourselves, but we all have different sides of us that we present in different situations. And you can take this concept further into, this mask becoming some sort of demon, some sort of entity that lives within you. And again, I don't want to go too crazy on this topic, because if you're really interested to know this kind of stuff, there are tons of books and people who can speak and elaborate it and explain it to you in a much easier way than I probably could. Black metal and Satanism goes together pretty well, and I think that if we never had some sort of adversarial satanic approach to black metal, I don't think the music would be the same. I think that this kind of dark, again, black metal is very varied. It's not just satanic. There are many black metal bands who make music that's probably 0% related to Satanism on a, let's say, on an obvious level. I would say the idea of Satan is not something that you necessarily have to have some sort of overt expression of Satanism. I think a lot of it can be covert, whether a band is using the image or not. Satanism is more of a mental framework, I want to say, and it's not so easy to see all the time. It just, depending on the person, how you use it. But yeah, I don't know if this is going to be anywhere coherent, just because this topic is varied and there's a lot of things to talk about within it. And I am not always the person who's great at explaining all this stuff, so hopefully this video was interesting to some extent, and yeah, perhaps this will actually be uploaded. We shall see if I'm able to cut enough to make it coherent. But yeah, that's all for now, guys, and bye.